Hey Simonics, what's up? Welcome to a new tutorial, and today we're going to talk about a problem that I had in the past because I was working on the Ionic job board, which you should definitely check out, ionicjobs.io. It's free, you can post jobs, you can get jobs for Ionic, and I wanted to implement an email list. And turns out this isn't super easy, but with a combination of Firebase and an additional tool to handle our email list, which is Sendfox that we're going to use, it will become quite easy. So follow along if you want to know more about Firebase Cloud Functions, Callable functions, and building an email list. I already started a blank new Ionic application and we can check it out. It already contains a basic mockup. So inside our homepage, I just added two items with labels for email and the first name, and two buttons to show you two different ways to use Firebase Cloud Functions. Besides that, I haven't really added anything interesting, just the object to our page and a little toast helper for later on. The idea now is that a user will sign up in your application, and we need to send the information of the user to Sendfox. So Sendfox is a really simple email list tool. I usually use ConvertKit for my main email list with a lot of automations and sequences, but if you just want to do a simple email list, this tool, I think it's kind of new, is actually great because it also has an API that we can easily trigger, and that's exactly what we want to do. So what we need is, first of all, on Sendfox account, you can create one for free, and then go to your account, API, and the personal access tokens. So in here, you will have to generate a new token in a second, and also you're gonna have to create a new list. I already created the devdectic subs list. You can upload something, but we don't really wanna do anything like this right now. Also, once you get the list, you will see that you get an ID for the list, which is also important, but we will also come back to this later. Besides that, of course, you need a Firebase project, and that's also where we're going to start, because first of all, you have to enable the Cloud Firestore database in order to use it, and then you have to integrate it in your project. Of course, inside your Ionic project, you also have to run install for Firebase and Angular Fire. Of course, you can also just use Firebase, but I still like Angular Fire to use it. Now, within your Firebase project, you need to add an app, a web app, just give it whatever name, and then copy out this block of configuration. That's really, like always, the connection between Firebase and our Ionic application. So then go ahead, inside your environment, paste under the Firebase key the details of your application, and then we will head over back to our app module because we need quite a few imports. So what we need is the Angular Fire module, which is like the basic module for Angular Fire. Then we need our environment, which holds the Firebase information. So that's how we initialize the connection. And then we also need the Firestore module to work with the database, and the Fire Functions module. So that's something we haven't used in the past, I think. And this will be used to directly call functions just like any API inside Firebase. It's like serverless programming today. What you need as well is actually to a functions region setup. Visual Studio. And this one goes to the array of providers. So for the functions region, you have to specify the value, which is your region. I'm not sure if we can already see it in here. I think we see US Central here, but we will also see this later once we deploy our functions to Firebase. Now, with that in place, we can head over to our homepage to implement the two functions that we already got in the view. So, as I said before, we want to handle things two ways. I want to show you a cloud trigger which reacts to changes in the database, and I also want to show you direct subscribed using the callable cloud functions. And to do so, we're gonna have to inject first of all the database, which is Angular Firestore, and then as well the new element that you might haven't used before, functions Angular Fire functions. There we go. So make sure you got the imports right as usual. It seems like I have made the same. Let's start with the database trigger. The idea here is that we write something to the database, and in the background we will create a Firebase cloud function that automatically is triggered once we write to a certain location inside Firestore. You can use this for really a lot of things, and for us we want to set within the database using the collection, which we will just call subs for subscribers. And then we want to add data to this collection. So we want to add an email, this user data email, and also first name, which is this user data first name. It has to be first name because that's what the Sendfox API expects. You can see this somewhere, I'm not really sure, right here. So if you make a post to contacts, you need required params email and optional params first name, last name, and an array of list IDs. So that's the route we're gonna use. You can also test this with Postman up front. Now, once this happens, we actually don't really need anything else. We could log out a bit. So let me bring in a really simple then block. Yeah, that's not the then block. There we go. So once we're done, we will just show a little toast. You're now subscribed. Nothing special. Everything else will be handled with a cloud function that we hopefully implement soon. The second way to do this is to directly call a cloud function. And the call looks a bit strange because first of all, you create a callable, which comes from this functions and then HTTPS callable. In here, you basically specify the name of the cloud function that you want to call. I will just call this one right here @subscriber, and this is important as we will use this in the cloud function later as well. Right now, nothing is happening, and if you type callable, you will see that it's not really yet an observable or anything like this. You need to get an observable from this callable first of all by calling it. So you see, if you call it, you will receive an observable. And by calling it, you can now pass data to our cloud functions, just like you're making a post request with a standard HTTP provider and providing data. And we're gonna provide the same data like we wrote with the other button to our database. And now if you check out the obs type, you will see it's an observable, and we can finally subscribe, do whatever we want to do, and show a toast with result.message. So we're responsible for returning whatever information from that observable. That's actually everything you need to do from the Ionic side. So you could basically also do this with standard Angular. This is nothing special to Ionic. Just two different ways to do the same thing, whatever you prefer, and also to show you this procedure for potentially other areas where you want to do this. Now the Firebase functions integration starts, and to do so you have to go to the root of your project and call Firebase init. If you haven't installed the tools, you might also need to install the Firebase tools globally. And once you're doing this, you will get asked quite a lot of questions. So for our integration, I only want to use the functions right now. So with space, I can select that, and with enter, I go next. I'll then use an existing project. So let's see. There we go. There's my email list. Now, what language would you like to use? I would like to use TypeScript. This is now perhaps covering. So the question, do you want to use TS-lint? Yes, of course. And do you want to install dependencies now? Yes, as well. This will create a few files. First of all, it will create a functions folder, which is quite empty. We got a standard package JSON that we can check out already. So here we see a few scripts to run the functions, 2 dependencies initially for admin and functions, and also some dev dependencies. Now, inside that folder, we also need to install one more dependency once this is done. And we can also already go ahead and close most of this and open our index.ts. So this is the place where you write your Firebase Cloud functions. First of all, I will bring in one more import that we also install once this is done, which is Axios. This is just a standard node I think it's a node or just JavaScript client to make HTTP requests. So of course, we also need to install this package. Make sure you cd or you change the directory to the functions directory and then install it. And this will write it, hopefully. Npm install, of course. Write it to the package.json inside the functions folder. So don't install it in the Ionic project, but in the functions project. And then we can go ahead, but what we need now is the key to our app right here. And I will just create a new token key. I will call it video test so I can remove it later. This will create a new token. You need to copy it. This is the only time it will be shown. So, go ahead and copy the key. And then we're gonna use it. We're not going to write it in here because that's just ugly and that's not what you do. But what we do is we're setting it to Firebase directly by using Firebase functions set. So this allows us to write some environment variables to Firebase. And we're gonna set it to Sendfox key and just paste everything in, and there we go. So hopefully this finishes in a few seconds. And then Firebase functions config. Firebase functions config set. So that should be the right way to set a key. Once you've run this command and it worked, you also need to deploy the functions, but we're gonna do this anyway in a second. And the way to retrieve this now is simply by using functions config and then the property that you're gonna use. So we wrote it to sendfox.key, and that's of course now the way where we can get it. So now onto the two ways to handle our subscription. First of all, we're gonna create the Callable Cloud function, and the name now is @subscriber, and this is now the name that we also used in here. So that's really important, the name of the function that we use for the Callable function. And this one's now from, let's do a bit clearer in here, functions.firestore on call. I feel like I'm a bit in the wrong way. Yeah, I'm definitely wrong. It's in functions HTTPS on call. There's also on request. It's kind of the same, but on call works better for a front-end application like we have. And then we have access to data and a context, and then we can create our callable function. I will actually bring in the helper function now to make life a bit easier, which will make our HTTP request to Sendfox. So the idea is to create the object that the API expects. Again, you can check it out here, API sendfox.com/contacts. That's exactly the URL we use for our request. We make a post request and we pass in a few of these parameters. So we pass in user lists, an array of lists where you want to subscribe the user. I will just use this ID. It's one of my lists. I also set the authorization header, which is our Sendfox key that we got up here. Keep in mind that you also need to prepend or I think it's called like this, put Bira in front of the key. So it's just like any JSON Web Token authentication, you know. And then as the data for our post request, the user object, which now also contains in this function, and I can put it in here, callable, what's it called? Data. So this data object is now inside Firebase exactly what we specified in here in our front end. So it has an email and first name, And because we structured it like this, we can directly pass it to our function. Inside the function, we will then also add the lists to it. So in the end, let's log this out as well. User data now, user. We can see all of these logs later. Then we're using the XUS, which we installed with the options, which makes a post request to this URL with the header set and the data included. And this will automatically, hopefully, subscribe our user to our email list. The second way is to react to incoming changes in the Firestore database. So we want to export new subscriber is functions now Firestore document, and this is now a trigger waiting for new data to be changed in a specific path. So we're going to use this syntax. You could use this for a lot of cases. I use this for payment handling, for example. So you write something and then Firebase handles all of the payment res, and you can really do a lot of things. You can subscribe to the creation of users and automatically generate a new node in the database in a collection and store additional data. So there's really a lot you can do with these triggers. And right now we just want to listen to on create. So you see all of them on write, on update, on delete, maybe on delete, interesting if you want to remove all of the user data. Really, you don't need a backend anymore if you're using Firebase. And in here you get data like this. You get a snapshot and a context. To get the actual data which is written to the database, you have to extract this a bit. So you're gonna use snapshot data, which will retrieve all fields in the document as an object. That's exactly what we wanna do. So let's log this out. Firebase document is now user. So this field now contains the information that we have written to the collection, and we know we have written to the collection email and first name. So once again, we can simply use our @Sendfox function and this time pass in data. And to make this a success, you should also return true in this function. For our callable function, remember, it's just like an HTTP call. We also can return whatever we want to do. And we will just return message, you are now subscribed through a callable function. And because we know that we created an object like this, we're also handling it in our Ionic app like this. Once we get the data back from the observable, we present exactly this message in our toast. Now we got everything in place, and now it's time to deploy our functions. We already saw this before once we added the key that we should run Firebase deploy only functions. You can also deploy only specific functions if you just want to update them. But right now, this will deploy all of our functions. All right, our functions are deployed, and now you can also see where they are deployed. So if this is different in your case, it's not US central, make sure that you go back to your app module and within change the region right here to whatever value you got. Let's take a look at our functions within Firebase. You should now see that you got two functions. One has URL, Devdectic email list, cloud functions, @subscriber. It's basically a route that you can call like any API, and this one will listen on document create at this location. I'll check out the logs and move on to my file list application. Also, let's monitor this. Here you see the ID of my email list, and currently we got 0 subscribers. So I will create one. a@b.com, and we'll call this Simon. The first one will use the standard callable cloud function. So let's trigger this one, and you're now subscribed through a callable function. This message, remember, comes from our cloud function right here. If we now go back, or actually we see the live logs coming in, so we see we called this function with email and first name, the data we have specified, and there is the log. So we got access to all the data. And then we got the user data object, which looks like email, first name, lists with an array. So exactly what Sendfox expects. We get back 200, looking good. So let's check out. And we see we got a new subscriber with the first name Simon in here. Now we also want to check out our other option, which is, let's do whatever and call this Simi. And then we want to do this with a database trigger. So a different log, and we can now check out our database, and we should see that under the subs collection, we got a new node with the email and name right in here. And because the trigger is implemented in the Cloud function, this information will be used, and hopefully, there we go, the second user with our name right in there using the great Cloud functions that we created up front. So that's how you make Firebase Cloud functions work for us to create an email list using Sendfox. There are a lot of other ways to use Cloud functions in a really great way. If you want to know more about the topics of Cloud functions, callable functions, database triggers, writing to the database, or reacting to different changes, just let me know below. One more addition is that you might have to set your Firebase plan to Blaze, so pay-as-you-go paid account, in order to make external HTTP requests. You will see this inside the logs of your Firebase functions, that the post request to Sendfox or whatever you want to try out isn't working. So upgrade your account. I think the first whatever calls are free anyway, so just give it a try and see how great these Cloud triggers work. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and stay subscribed so you get notified about all the new tutorials, quick wins, and other app development and web development videos on this channel. If you want to learn more about Ionic with in-depth courses, a community of like-minded developers so you can learn and build your apps faster, you should definitely check out the Ionic Academy, which is my code school to help you with everything Ionic, with a huge library of courses, material, and a supportive Slack channel so we can get your app out. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you inside the next video. Have a great day and happy coding, Simon.